The worst part of patrol duty wasn't danger. It was the absence of it. Ensign Tarin Kade sat on the edge of his bunk, running a cloth along the matte black casing of his service pistol for the third time that day. The weapon didn't need cleaning shipboard. Regulations demanded it anyway, but the ritual gave his hands something to do while the hours leaped. Away into the nothingness between stars, the HCS Meridian drifted at low burn near the border of mapped space. A thin line of alloy and optimism in a void that didn't care. Their assignment was simple. Watch a quiet corridor, scan for smugglers, check beacons, log micrometeor storms, and try not to go mad from monotony. The crew had developed boredom like an extra organ. People argued over coffee rationing, held dramatic tournaments with magnetic darts, and started a rumor that the ventilation system was haunted because it sometimes whistled like someone sighing. Tarin's own coping mechanism was maintenance. He'd just reassembled the pistol when the bunk curtain snapped open. Lieutenant Nessa Erie, communications officer, stood there with the data slab clutched in both hands. Her face had that tight, pale look Tarin recognized from 2 years of deployments. The look of someone who had just seen something that would change the day. Or their lives. Ensign Kade, she said, and her voice didn't quite reach her eyes. You need to come with me. Tarin blinked. Am I in trouble? No, Nessa replied too quickly. Not with us. Behind her, the corridor lights seemed a shade colder. Tarin slid off the bunk, holstered the pistol out of habit, and followed her through the narrow passageways. Their ship wasn't built for ceremonies. It was built for endurance. Cramped compartments, functional surfaces, a smell of recycled air, and machine oil that never left your clothes. Okay, Tarin said, keeping his tone light because that's what you did when your stomach started sinking. What is it? Nessa didn't answer until they reached the comms bay. The door sealed behind them with a hiss. The room hummed with signal processors and analyzers. Banks of displays showing the endless drizzle of space noise. In the center console, a single message window glowed. The header was wrong. Not human fleet formatting. Not even one of the trader guilds. The glyphs looked like arcs of liquid metal, curling into themselves like waves frozen mid-crash. At the top was a seal Tarin had seen only in briefings. A circle split by a vertical line, flanked by 3 stars that weren't quite stars. The symbol of the Vayari sovereignty, humanity's newest and strangest ally. Tarin swallowed. That's official. Nessa's fingers trembled as she tapped the display. It came through secure diplomatic channels. Verified encryption. Triple authenticated. No spoofing. No corruption. Why is it addressed to me? Tarin asked, though he already knew the answer, because his name was right there, highlighted in stark white. To Ensign Tarin Kade, Human Commonwealth Fleet by order of Her Luminant Majesty. Sovereign Orlin of Vayar. Nessa exhaled shakily. I couldn't read the original. The translator took 3 pauses to render it, but the meaning is clear. Tarin's thumb hovered over the translation toggle. The room felt too small. He pressed it. The alien glyphs dissolved into human script. You are summoned to private audience before the throne of Starglass. A Vayari escort will arrive at your location within 6 hours standard. This summons may not be declined or deferred. Signed, Commander Sentinel Zevin Tar. Tarin stared at the words until they became shapes instead of meaning. I think, he said slowly, they sent this to the wrong Tarin. Nessa looked at him with something between fear and pity. There's only one Tarin Kade assigned anywhere near this corridor. I checked. Why would a Vayari sovereign and actual ruler want me? Tarin asked. Nessa swallowed. That's what I hoped you'd tell me. A chime sounded from the intercom. Comms. Came the bridge officer's voice. Captain wants Ensign Kade in the ready room. Now, Captain Juno Soto had the posture of someone who'd learned to sleep in a helmet and smile through decompression alarms. She had commanded the Meridian for 11 years, and Tarin had seen her comm in engine fires, pirate fights, and a near miss with a debris field that would have shredded lesser ships. He had never seen her worried dot when Tarin entered. She didn't offer a seat. She stood behind her desk, arms braced, eyes locked on him as if she could pin the universe down by sheer force. Ensign, she said, tell me you know what this is about. Tarin shook his head. No, Captain. Sato's gaze flicked to the data slab on her desk, another copy of the summons. I've read it 7 times. Diplomatic seal is authentic. Codes match the treaty registry. Tarin tried to keep his voice steady. Could it be a trap? From the Vayari? Soto asked, then gave a short, humorless laugh. If they wanted to kill you, they'd send a photon lance through our hull from across the system and call it an accident. They wouldn't issue a formal invitation. Tarin didn't find that reassuring. Captain Soto came around the desk and leaned forward. You have had any interaction with Vayari personnel? Any contact at all? Tarin thought fast. Joint convoy drills at Port Kestrel. I was on security rotation. I never spoke to them directly. Anything else? He hesitated, and the memory rose like a pressure change. 2 years ago, Tarin said quietly, the Sable Fever outbreak. The escort action at Gannett Reach. Sato's eyes sharpened. You were there? I was assigned to the destroyer HCS Ardent, Tarin said. We were screening evac ships, trying to keep infected craft from reaching the jump lane. The Ardent lost her captain, Soto said. Voice low. Tarin nodded once. Bridge strike. Captain Morag didn't make it. And you? Sato's expression tightened. You were acting command for a short window. Tarin's hands curled unconsciously, as if gripping a rail. For 12 minutes. What did you do in those 12 minutes, Ensign? Tarin stared at the bulkhead behind Sato's shoulder. I did the only thing left. He hadn't told the story often. The fleet reports summarized it in sterile lines. Decisive action prevented civilian losses. But the truth lived in his dreams in bright, terrible detail. We were outgunned, he said. Main power failing. Weapons dead. The infected ships were closing on the evac convoy. 9 transport vessels. Over 2,000 people. Soto didn't interrupt. I ordered emergency engine routing. Tarin continued. Dumped everything we had into thrust. We rammed the lead infected cruiser. Silence held the ready room like a vacuum. Soto finally exhaled. You sacrificed the Ardent. It was already dying, Tarin said, the old defensive edge creeping in. If we ran, the convoy died. If we stayed, we died anyway. So, We made it count. Sato's voice was very steady. How did you survive? Pods launched seconds before impact, Tarin said. We lost 41. He stopped, because there was no clean way to finish that sentence. Sato looked at him for a long moment, then turned to the window where stars slid past like indifferent sparks. The Veari fought in that sector, she said. Tarin frowned. I never saw them. Comms were chaos. Sato's jaw tightened. The Veari were there, and if their sovereign is summoning you now, it's not for small talk. A soft alert tone interrupted them. Sato tapped the desk console. Bridge to captain, the officer said. We have a contact dropping in at the outer marker. It's broadcasting Veari's sovereignty identification. Escort class. Sato's eyes flicked back to Tarin. 6 hours, she murmured. They didn't even bother with courtesy. Tarin's pulse hammered. Sato straightened. Ensign Kade, you will pack a formal kit. Dress uniform. Personal effects. Nothing else. You will behave as if every word you speak will be recorded and replayed at a treaty summit. Understood. Yes, Captain. And Tarin, she added, softer, almost human for once. Whatever this is, you are not alone. Your crew, that matters. Tarin swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. By the time Tarin returned to his quarters, the ship already felt different. Rumors traveled faster than light in tight corridors. Crew members leaned out of doorways, murmuring as he passed. Someone clapped him on the shoulder like he was already a legend. Someone else stared like he was already a dead man. Nessa waited by his bunk as he stuffed clothing into a small deployment bag. You look like you're going to be sick, she said. I might, Tarin admitted. Nessa's expression softened. Do you think they'll hurt you? Tarin paused with a folded jacket in his hands. I don't know. The message says it can't be refused. That's not how you invite someone to tea. Nessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. I heard the Veari don't do polite. They do. Inevitable. That's a comforting rumor, Tarin said dryly, though his mouth was too tight for a real joke. The ship's announcement system chimed. Ensign Tarin Kade, report to docking bay to. Escort transport is prepared for departure. Nessa grabbed his sleeve as he turned. Hey, when he looked back, her eyes were bright. Whatever this is, remember you're not just Tarin right now. You're us. Don't let them make you feel small. Tarin swallowed. I'll try. He stepped into the corridor and walked toward the bay. The sound of his boots too loud. Docking bay was crowded. Captain Sato stood with senior staff at the front, arms folded, face set like iron. Beyond them, the alien craft waited. It was smaller than the Meridian, but somehow more commanding. Its hull looked like pale glass, except glass didn't shimmer with faint internal starlight, and it didn't bend reflections as if reality itself was uncertain round it. The air seemed cooler near it, like standing beside deep water. A seam opened along its side without any visible mechanism. A ramp unfolded with fluid precision to figures. Emerged. They were tall, narrow, and impossibly still. Their bodies were sheathed in layered plates that looked grown rather than forged, translucent armor with veins of light running through it like frozen lightning. Their faces, if you could call them, that were smooth, with only shallow contours and dark, pupilless eyes like polished obsidian. One wore a crest of metal filaments that drifted as if underwater. A small device at its throat clicked. The voice that followed was clear, but wrong in an uncanny way, as if the translator had learned speech from songs. Rather than conversation, Ensign Tarin Kade of the Human Commonwealth Fleet. It said, "I am Sentinel Verokin, bound to the throne of starglass. You will accompany us to her luminant Majesty." Tarin looked back once at Captain Soto. She gave him a single nod. Tarin drew a breath and stepped forward. The ramp accepted his weight without sound. Behind him, someone started cheering, half nervous relief, half genuine support. It spread through the bay like a wave. By the time the ramp began folding closed, the entire crew was shouting his name. Tarin didn't feel heroic. He felt like he was walking into a storm because the sky had asked him to. Inside the Ve'ari transport, the light had no source. It existed in the air, soft and even, like dawn trapped indoors. The walls were curved, seamless, and faintly luminous, as if the ship was grown from a single piece of crystal. The air smelled faintly of rain on stone. A seat rose from the floor when Tarin approached, shaping itself to his body with unnerving gentleness. "Please," Sentinel Verokin said. "The transit will require 6 hours." Tarin sat, gripping his bag strap like it could anchor him. "Sentinel," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Why am I being summoned?" Vero's head tilted a fraction. "I am not permitted to speak of the reason." "Right," Tarin muttered. "Of course." Another Ve'ari entered shorter, wrapped in flowing fabric that shimmered like heat haze. Its movements were quieter, more organic. "My designation is Sail, caretaker of the traveling court," it said. "Your physiology requires sustenance and hydration. We have prepared acceptable nourishment." A panel opened. A tray slid out. The food looked almost familiar. Something like bread, something like fruit, something like protein cut into neat squares. Tarin took a cautious bite. It tasted like warm grain and citrus, and something savory that reminded him of home in a way. That made his throat tighten. Sail watched him with unreadable eyes. "Palate acceptance is adequate. It's good," Tarin admitted. "Thanks." At the mention of the sable fever earlier, the two Ve'ari had gone still. Now, as Tarin ate, he felt their attention sharpen again. "You served at Gannett Reach," Vero said. Tarin paused mid-chew. "Yes." Vero's voice softened, almost reverent. "The Reach was a hinge of history." Tarin frowned. "For us it was a nightmare." "The same," Sail said quietly. In different language, Tarin set the food down, appetite fading under a new awareness. They weren't curious about him because he was human. They were curious because of what he'd done. "What is Her Majesty like?" Tarin asked, partly to redirect his own spiraling mind. Sail's posture changed, and for the first time Tarin saw something like emotion. "Orlin has held the throne of Starglass for 180 cycles," Sail said. "She sees patterns where others see chaos." 180. Tarin echoed. "That's... How old is she?" Vero's head tilted. "Your species counts time as if it is a possession. We measure it as an ocean," That doesn't answer the question, Tarin said. Sel's voice carried something like amusement. She is considered young. Tarin stared at the drifting stars outside the transparent hull and tried not to imagine what it meant to be young. At nearly 2 centuries, the transport moved strangely. Space seemed to curve. Points of light stretched and then snapped back, as if the ship was slipping between layers of reality rather than crossing distance. After an hour, Vero said, "We approached the palace of Lumenfall." Tarin looked up. At first, he thought it was a cluster of ships. Then he realized it was a city. A vast structure floated ahead, built from interlocking arcs and spires that looked like frozen waterfalls of crystal. Bridges curved between towers. Rings of light rotated slowly around the whole, casting shifting shadows across its surface. Smaller vessels orbited it in disciplined patterns, like bees around a hive. Except these bees were warships. The palace wasn't merely large. It was impossible, an architectural declaration that the universe could be reshaped by will. "How many live there?" Tarin asked, voice small despite himself. 800,000, Sale replied. Court, ministries, fleet orders, artisans, scholars. The throne travels with its people. The transport slid into a docking corridor made of translucent ribs. Light flowed through the walls like blood through veins. Tarin's stomach clenched. This wasn't a visit. It was an entry into power. When the ship settled, Vero straightened its armor as if preparing for ritual. "You will be guided to quarters," Vero said. "You will be summoned when Her Majesty is ready." "How long?" Tarin asked. Sel's gaze held him. "Royal time does not respect your schedules." The door opened with a soft harmonic tone, like a chord struck gently. Warm air rolled in, smelling of salt and flowers. Tarin stepped onto a platform of shimmering material that looked like glass, but felt like stone under his boots. 2 more sentinels waited, their armor brighter, their crests more elaborate. One spoke through a translator. "I am Marshal Evan Sayre, Palace Guard. You will follow." Tarin followed. Corridors unfolded like dreams, transparent walls showing starfields, gardens growing along vertical surfaces, plants glowing faintly as if photosynthesizing starlight, murals that moved, depicting Vayari history in flowing, abstract forms. Aliens passed them, some Vayari, some clearly not. Tall, insectal beings with folded wings, compact, amphibious creatures in water suits, entities that moved as swirls of dust held in invisible fields, a multi-species empire. And everywhere Tarin went, eyes turned, whispers followed, some bowed their heads as he passed. Tarin's throat went dry. "Why are they doing that?" Marshal Sayre replied without looking back. "Word travels. Her Majesty has summoned a human to private audience. That has not occurred within living memory. They rode a lift that didn't move up so much as shift sideways through space, the sensation making Tarin's stomach float. Through its transparent walls he saw the palace's inner architecture. Layered chambers, rotating rings, corridors intersecting at impossible angles. The lift opened into a corridor lined with pools. Water hung in midair in slow spheres, each reflecting distant nebulae as if it contained a piece of space. Tarin's assigned quarters were larger than any room he'd had on a human vessel. Curved windows showed a sweep of stars and the distant silhouette of the Meridian tiny, almost laughable, among the Vayari fleet. The room responded to spoken commands. A station produced food. A closet contained formal attire that was clearly designed to fit a human body, dark fabric with faint silver threads that caught the light like constellations. They had prepared for him. That meant they had planned this long, before the Meridian ever entered this sector. That thought sat in Tarin's chest like a stone. Hours passed. Tarin tried to rest, but couldn't. He paced. He stared at the palace city outside. He ate without tasting. Voices murmured in the corridor outside his door. He heard his name Kade spoken in accents and syllables that didn't belong to human tongues. Then the door chimed. Marshal Ser entered, followed by a Vayari in robes that looked like layered mist, their crest woven with delicate filaments of gold. "This is Chancellor Yara Vess," Ser said, "advisor to Her Majesty. The Chancellor will speak with you before your audience." Chancellor Vess moved with careful grace. When they spoke, the translator rendered the voice as calm and deep, like a low instrument. "Ensign Kade," Vess said, "you will answer questions with honesty. Deception is a stain that does not wash from starglass." Tarin swallowed. "Understood." The Chancellor's questions began: routine, training, service record, assignments, family history. Then they turned sharp: specific engagements, dates, moments that Tarin hadn't realized anyone beyond human command had logged. Gannet reach. Vess said, "Describe the moment you assumed command." Tarin's palms dampened. He answered, "Describe your decision to commit the Ardent to collision," Vess said. Tarin's throat tightened. He told them. When he finished, Chancellor Vess regarded him a long moment. "Tomorrow," Vess said, "you will learn why Her Majesty has summoned you. The knowledge may alter your understanding of your own history." A chill ran down Tarin's spine. "What do you mean?" Vess did not answer. They turned and left as if that was explanation enough. Tarin stood alone in a room of soft light, staring at his reflection in the dark window. He looked the same, but the universe had begun to treat him like someone else. He woke to music, quiet, resonant, woven into the walls. His sleep had been thin, full of flashes, the Ardent's alarms, the tremor before impact, the faces of people he couldn't save, after a meal that tasted like earth and regret. Marshal Ser arrived. "Ensign Kade," Ser said, "Her Majesty will see you in 1 hour." Tarin dressed in the provided formal attire. It fit too well, like they'd measured him in his sleep. Ser led him through more ornate corridors, past checkpoints with scanning beams that hummed against Tarin's skin like cold air. The closer they got, the quieter the palace became. They entered a waiting chamber where officials sat in silence, robed advisors, military figures, beings with jeweled implants, and eyes like mirrors. All of them stared at Tarin with the calm attention of people observing a rare event. A tall official spoke in careful English. "You must be of great importance to your people." Tarin shook his head. "I may not. I don't know why I'm here." That drew a ripple of surprise through the chamber. A door opened at the far end. Chancellor Vess appeared. "Ensign Kade, enter." They walked down a corridor whose walls displayed shifting star maps, galaxies rotating, nebulae blooming like slow fireworks. The ceiling was so high it seemed to disappear. Massive doors waited ahead, carved with patterns that changed as Tarin looked at them. Saya paused. Beyond is the throne sphere. Speak truth. Show respect. Do not kneel unless invited. Tarin's heart hammered. I'm ready. He lied. The doors opened without sound. Tarin stepped into the throne sphere and forgot how to breathe. There was no clear floor or ceiling. The room was a perfect orb. The walls were a living window into space, real-time images of stars and planets sliding past. As if the palace floated inside the universe itself. At the center sat the throne, a structure of crystalline arcs rising like a tree made of light. The glow within it pulsed gently, not bright enough to blind, but impossible to ignore. Upon it sat Her Luminant Majesty Orlin. She was taller than the sentinels. Her form was very slender, plated, elegant, but her armor or skin carried a depth of color like starlight trapped under ice. Her crest was a crown of shifting filaments that floated as if gravity had forgotten it. Her eyes were black and vast. When Orlin looked at Tarin, he felt seen, not in the sense of being observed, but in the sense of being understood. Ensign Tarin Kade, Orlin said. Her voice filled the sphere without being loud. It was as if the room itself spoke. Approach. Tarin walked forward. His boots made no sound. When he reached a respectful distance, he bowed his head the way Ser instructed. Your Majesty, Tarin said, voice tight. Thank you for this honor. I am at your service. Orlin lifted a hand. The air shimmered. Tarin blinked, and suddenly the throne sphere was empty except for the two of them. No guards, no chancellor, no witnesses. They hadn't walked away. They had simply ceased to exist within the space Tarin occupied. Like a curtain drawn through reality, Tarin's breath caught. Orlin studied him. Tell me, human, what do you believe makes your kind stubbornly difficult to erase? Tarin hadn't expected philosophy. He forced his mind to work. We keep going, he said. Even when it's stupid, even when it hurts. Orlin's crest shifted in a way that might have been amusement, a trait both admirable and catastrophic. She gestured. The walls changed, replacing drifting galaxies with recorded scenes, ships, alarms, people running, stars streaking. Tarin recognized the visuals instantly. Fleet footage. Gannet reach. The sable fever ships infected, hollowed, driven by something hungry and mindless, slid through space like dead predators. Orlin's voice was calm. When the sable fever spread, my council urged separation. Let humanity burn in its own corridor, they said. Protect Vaya. Tarin felt his jaw tighten, but remained silent. I considered it. Orlin continued. Fear is persuasive. The scene zoomed. The HCS Ardent appeared, his old ship damaged. Venting atmosphere, drifting near the evac convoy like a wounded animal refusing to lie down. You were not meant to matter, Orlin said softly. A minor officer on a failing vessel. Tarin watched the footage as if it belonged to someone else. The Ardent turned slowly toward the largest infected cruiser. You chose collision, Orlin said. You turned your ship into a blade. The image paused just before impact before the whiteout flash Tarin remembered too well. What you did not know, Orlin said, was who traveled among those evac ships. Tarin's pulse thudded in his ears. Your Majesty. Orlin's eyes did not blink. My heir, Siren of the Inner Veil, was present, hidden. Tarin's mouth went dry. Your heir was on a human convoy? In a human bodysuit, Orlin said, almost casually, using the name Dr. Sira Kane. Embedded with your researchers. Tarin stared, stunned. Orlin continued. Siren led the team that refined the countermeasure that ended the Sable Fever's expansion. Into both our territories, Tarin's knees threatened to soften. He forced himself to stand. I didn't know, he said. I was just trying to keep the convoy alive. That, Orlin said, and there was something sharp and bright in her tone, is why I summoned you. She rose from the throne. Up close, she felt less like a person and more like a force quiet gravity in humanoid form. Orlin moved to an alcove Tarin hadn't noticed. An object floated within it, held by invisible fields. It was not a crystal like the palace walls. It was darker smoked glass threaded with inner light, like a storm trapped inside a gemstone. The light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Orlin lifted it with both hands as if it carried weight beyond physics. This is starglass core, she said, a relic of our founding. It is granted only to those who alter the course of our people through selfless action. Tarin's voice came out hoarse. Your Majesty, I can't. I'm not. Orlin stepped closer. The starglass light reflected in her eyes like distant suns. You saved my heir, she said simply. You preserved the cure. You prevented a war of desperation and disease. You did it without knowing who benefited. You sought no reward. Tarin looked down at his hands, suddenly aware they were shaking. Orlin extended the starglass core. Take it, she said. Let the galaxy learn that honor does not belong to one species. Tarin hesitated a heartbeat, then reached out. The moment his fingers touched the relic, warmth spread through his body like sunlight poured into his veins. The inner storm light brightened, responding to him as if recognizing something. Tarin gasped softly. Orlin's voice softened. With this comes a title within our court, Bridge-bearer of Vea, a seat of council. Should you ever choose to speak, no chains, no conscription. Tarin looked up, panic and awe tangled together. But I'm human fleet. My loyalty remains yours, Orlin said. I do not summon you to steal you. I summon you to bind what was already bound by blood and sacrifice. She lifted a hand. The sphere shimmered again. Chancellor Vess, Marshal Serre, and a ring of dignitaries appeared silent, as if they had been waiting outside existence. Orlin's voice rose, filling the entire throne sphere. Witness, she declared. Today the throne of Starglass honors a human, Tarin Kade, who chose the hard path when the easy path was surrender. Let it be known across Vea and beyond. The covenant between our peoples is no longer ink on treaty tablets. It is deed, carried in living hands. The dignitaries bowed in unison. Tarin stood frozen, holding a relic older than his language. While an empire acknowledged him like a turning point, his mind tried to reject it. His body could not. Orlin stepped closer and placed a hand lightly against Tarin's shoulder, gentle, measured, ceremonial. "You will return to your ship," she said. "Quiet now, meant only for him. You will continue being who you are, but you will do so knowing that your smallest decision may have echoed farther than you imagined." Tarin swallowed, throat tight. "What happens now?" he whispered. Oralin's eyes held something like warmth. "Now the galaxy adjusts. Later, when Tarin walked back toward the waiting transport, the palace of Lumenfall no longer felt like a wonder. It felt like a spotlight. He clutched the starglass core wrapped in ceremonial cloth, and every corridor seemed filled with watching eyes. News traveled. Even in a palace of light, a human had been marked by the throne. When he boarded the transport, Sentinel Verokin bowed not deeply, but with unmistakable respect. "You carry the storm," Vero said. Tarin forced a breath. "I didn't ask for it." Vero's voice was quiet. "The storm does not ask. It simply arrives." As the transport pulled away from Lumenfall and stars stretched into lines again, Tarin stared out at the thin silhouette of the meridian somewhere ahead. He wasn't sure how Captain Soto would react. He wasn't sure how human command would react. He wasn't sure how an empire's attention would change his life. But he knew one thing with uncomfortable clarity. The boring patrol was over, and it was never coming back.